I don't want no oil a-spoiling my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things a-creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes! All right. Welcome. This is Joe DeMare, and hello, Toledo. Good afternoon, Columbus. And hello to all of those listening on the internet, wherever and whenever you are. You have tuned into a very special episode of For a Green Future. Very special because this is the 100th episode of For a Green Future. And we're very happy to be here. It's been a long road to 100, and we're just happy that we made it. And as a special treat, I was going to have this played on, I had it recorded, but I guess I'm going to do this live a cappella instead. I wanted to perform for you the never before publicly performed third verse to our theme song. And here it goes. I don't want that coal turning them old mountaintops into dust. I like clean flowing streams and children whose dreams don't all have to go bust. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nasty old coal's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. So there you go. Hope you enjoyed that. It is just a taste of all the wonderful things we're going to have for you this show. We're going to have one thing that we've got that I'm really looking forward to playing are some congratulatory notes that we recorded from past guests on the show who were nice enough to agree to sort of give us a little pat on the back here for episode 100. And I have to do a disclaimer before we play any of them. All of these congratulation recordings are personal. They're the person congratulating the show, congratulating us for what we've done, and not the organizations that they represent or the employers that they're employees of. So none of these are official congratulations, but they're still very nice. And in fact, Russell, can we hear the first one?
Good morning, Joe. Very happy to hear this is your 100th anniversary, and I'm wishing you well and many more. I have had the pleasure of being on your show, 2% of the time. So not bad. Enjoyed it, and keep up the good work.
Okay. That was Daryl Stockberger, who works for the Municipal Utility Company at Bowling Green, who's talked to us several times about Bowling Green's solar and wind project, expressed his appreciation for our show, and we have to appreciate him and the work he's doing too. So there will also be a contest a little later on. I'll announce during the show that you could possibly win some prizes. And we have, in addition to that, of course, it's still a regular Sunday, so we have our guest coming up. Pat Marida will be joining us again to talk about the return of the radioactive mutant son of House Bill 6, House Bill 104, and that'll be coming up around 8:15. Rebecca Wood will be joining us, our wonderful co-host, who I believe has some answers to some burning holiday questions that people ask every year, and I think she's got some answers for some of those. And then we'll have our news and views, our eco news and views, our letter from the future, and of course, you are welcome to call in at any time at 866-240-1065. That's 866-240-1065. This is the best show in Ohio, but it does get better every time you call. And you're going to want to call today because what we're going to do is we're going to give prizes to the first 3 callers. And now some rules and restrictions. Of course, you got to be more than 18 to win the prize. You can call in if you're less than 18, but you can't win the prize. And what I'm going to ask you, you're going to have to call in. You're going to get on the air. And what I'm going to ask you is what your favorite episode of the past 100 episodes was, and why was that one your favorite? Why did that one speak to you? You have to answer those 2 questions. Oh, Pat Marida is on the line. All right. So Pat Marida is on the line, ready to go. So if we have a caller at 866-240-1065, you've got about 5 minutes. You can call in. We'll put you on before Pat, and then we'll take 2 more callers after Pat. But so we got 5 minutes till we start talking to Pat, and there's something I wanted to talk about here. I am, as I announced last week, where my wife and I are down here in the Boston area. And we, for the past several days, past 3 days, have been in the middle of a nor'easter. And I've heard about, the northeast storms, the nor'easters, and read about them, and I'd never really appreciated them before. For the past 3 days, it's just been a nonstop roar of wind. And from where we are, we can look out over Boston Harbor, and Boston Harbor is just covered in whitecaps. And the trees here have to be stronger than the trees back in Ohio, back in Toledo area, and because the winds here would have taken down a lot more trees in our area than they did here. They were just so strong and sustained, and the whole house was shaking sometimes. And the idea that we would be making storms like this worse through global warming is just incredible, but just the sheer power of all that heat coming in off the ocean, all that wind being driven by those temperature forces, it was just mind-boggling. I'm really glad I got to see that. Some other things that I've kind of seen and enjoyed out here while I'm around in Boston is I had a chance to see there was a big flock of turkeys. This is a very dense neighborhood. The houses are very close together, but there's a lot of trees in between them, and there's wetlands around them. And so this big old flock of turkeys came in, and I guess they're just part of the neighborhood. Everybody knows about them and likes them and doesn't molest them. But another thing that I saw was there's a sign on a fence outside of what was obviously a wetland. It was a marshy area with reeds and cattails growing in it, and it said housing lots for sale. And I was thinking, how could that be? That's obviously a wetland. And they had all this fill piled up next to the driveway they've got going into it, so they're obviously planning to just dump stuff in the wetland and then build on top of it. And I realized this is President Trump's redefining of wetlands to exclude everything that isn't actually a river. And so what you have in a nice, quiet neighborhood like this, full of trees with deer that wander around and turkeys that wander through people's yards, the wild areas that are left, those wetland areas, those are what make the turkey flocks possible, because turkeys can't really thrive in just plain old backyards. They've got to have that, that undisturbed area where they can do their turkey things. And so when Trump said, we're going to get rid of all the wetlands except things that are actually rivers, that meant that neighborhoods like this one get a little less cool, a little shabbier. There's less birds, less wildlife, no more turkeys, just another row of houses behind all the other closely packed houses that are. And that is one thing that we always hark on here in For a Green Future, and that is that a green future affects your health and your wealth and your happiness as on the ground. I mean, we talk about big policy decisions. We're going to change the wetland regulations. But what that boils down to is neighborhoods like this one lose a lot of the nature, a lot of the natural aspects that make them cool and livable neighborhoods. And we end up with just endless rows of houses packed side by side. And there is a verse in the Bible somewhere. It says, "Woe unto them that lay house to house and field to field, until there be no such place where a man may be alone with the earth." And that, as soon as I read that verse, I was like, you know what? That makes sense. And so that one's always stuck with me. So that's what's going on out here with me and Carol in Massachusetts. And but there's still stuff going on back in Ohio, important stuff that we need to talk about. And we have been lucky enough to get as our guest here Pat Marida. Pat, are you on the line?
Yes. Hi, Joe.
Hi. How are you doing?
I'm okay, and thanks so much for having me on your show.
Oh, our pleasure, Pat. Although the purpose you're on the show is not a pleasurable one. We have done a show on this before, on House Bill 104. And, could you just please give us a little rundown on what this bill is and where it's at in the legislature?
Yeah, so I'm a volunteer with the Ohio Sierra Club's Nuclear Free Committee. And so this House Bill 104, it's been around almost 2 years, but it might very well be voted on in the next couple of weeks before the end of the year. And basically what it is, it was written to benefit one small organization, and that's eGeneration. It's a small thorium-producing company up in the Cleveland area. And we knew that because originally it was 34 pages, and the language was similar to the language on the eGeneration website. But since then, it's been reduced to 10 pages, and so that language is gone that connects the bill with this one company. However, it lays out, in these 10 pages only, it lays out incredibly far-reaching obligations to the state of Ohio, and that includes it would create a nuclear development authority that is answerable to no one, not even to the governor. There's language that would allow for eminent domain.
Which means they could take your house if they want to.
Yeah, they could take land for whatever purpose. And they actually would take ownership. The state could actually take ownership of radioactive waste from Davis-Besse and Perry. And that's unprecedented because no state has taken that kind of ownership of radioactive waste. And so if that waste got spilled or spread, it could obligate Ohio for billions in cleanup.
Well, and since the waste is radioactive and poisonous for 100,000 years, they would be saying that the taxpayers basically are on the line for taking care of radioactive waste virtually forever. And even if there is never a spill, we're still talking unimaginable amounts of money and time and effort.
Yeah. But aside from that, the bill itself could obligate taxpayers for millions of dollars to subsidize this research and development of two different kinds of small modular reactors. And it's just another nuclear scandal on top of House Bill 6, which was the first energy bailout.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing. I mean, I think a lot of organizations that looked at this thought it was so crazy that it could not possibly go anywhere. But in fact, it's already passed the House. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, and so, it was introduced early in 2019, and I went to the State House and opposed the bill, and I was the only opponent because everyone else in the Sierra Club and other organizations, and they thought that it was too outrageous, that it would never pass. And I guess I said other organizations, but really at that point there weren't. We were the only ones that were really aware that this was going on. But then that's when March 2019, that's when it got reduced from 34 pages to 10 pages, and it passed the House committee about 11-2. And from there on, it languished for over a year until July 2020, when suddenly, astonishingly to all of us, it passed the Ohio House 80-11. And that was just before the arrest of 5 people connected to the First Energy nuclear and coal bailout. So we thought, well, they wouldn't dare talk about anything, any more nuclear subsidies after that.
But it appears that they're shameless.
So it was just, it wasn't long ago, about 3 weeks ago, it was referred to the Senate Energy and Public Utilities Committee. Well, we were astonished about that. And the first hearing that the committee had was the sponsor testimony. And so Representative Stein, who was the sponsor, came and testified before the Senate committee. And Senator Eklund asked him, well, who is this nuclear development authority that I mentioned before that was going to be created? Who are they responsible to? And Representative Stein couldn't answer the question. And he said, oh, we'll get back to you. And so the next week, they had, this is pretty standard, they'll have the sponsor testimony, one hearing, then the next hearing they'll have proponent testimony. That's the people that are in favor of it. Well, nobody testified in favor of it. And so we thought, well, maybe they won't bring it up again. But my goodness, they had another hearing. It said opponent testimony and possible vote. And so we gathered the troops, and we got a whole lot of people to call in and email and send testimony. And we had already, back in the past, we had gotten our lawyer, Terry Lodge, out of Toledo area there, and he's done a lot of pro bono anti-nuclear work. And he wrote a 9-page legal analysis of this bill and why it was a problem. And 56 organizations around the country signed on to it. So we sent that in. And we actually think that made a difference because they ended the meeting and they did not take a vote. But now it looks like before the end of the year, they might actually, we don't know whether they'll hold another hearing on this bill. There are 2 other bills in this committee, and so we think it's quite likely that they would hold another hearing. And that's kind of scary.
Yeah, I think the worst thing about this is that the public, the people that care about whether or not Ohio gets turned into a radioactive waste dump, we have to guess. We're locked out. All we get are the occasional public notices. Oh, they'll be a hearing this date, or there'll be a vote. There might be a vote that date. But I think it's pretty safe to say that the company that this is written for, the private industry people, are like, I'm pretty sure they have. It's my opinion. I'm going off of deduction and looking at what the evidence before me. They have unrestricted access to all our legislators. They essentially get to talk to them whenever they want to, and they get to influence them as much as they can and as much as they want, whereas the people of Ohio are being locked out of the legislative process. This is how it looks to me.
Yeah, well, it's hard to follow. Also, it's really hard to follow this legislation as it goes through the works at the legislature. You have to be really on your toes to even know what's going on. And of course, that's why it's important to join a public interest group or to join an environmental group so that you can, so that they'll help us all keep track of those things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's important to note that whenever taking care, one of the things they talk about in this bill is recycling nuclear waste, and whenever that's been tried anywhere in the world, it just creates a huge mess. It contaminates large areas, and you quote-unquote reprocess and you pull out a couple of the isotopes, plutonium and uranium, but you're left with hundreds of other radioactive isotopes that now actually the reprocessing process creates more waste, a larger volume, and it's really nasty, toxic stuff, and we still don't have any idea what to do with it. And so, creating this nuclear authority, which they call it an authority, but at least in the version of the bill I read, they only needed people to have master's degrees to be on, or bachelor's degrees, to be on this authority, quote unquote, to try to solve the nuclear waste problem that no one has been able to solve for going on 75 years now.
Yeah, well, you mentioned, recycling, and that's the word they use in these bills, recycling. It sounds good, but it's actually, as you mentioned also, it is reprocessing. So they actually add nitric acid to this is solid high-level radioactive waste. This is the waste from Davis, Bessie, and Perry. That type of waste. They add nitric acid to it, makes it a liquid. They take out some of the radioactivity, but most of the radioactivity is left, and now you have a liquid to deal with instead of a solid, and of course that's much harder to contain.
Yeah. So take radioactive waste and turn it into acid. That's a great idea. So, all right. Well, thanks for keeping on this, Pat. This is, the fact that it's passing by so much. I see the influence of because this means both Democrats and Republicans voted for it, right, in the House.
Yes.
With those margins. And what I see increasingly in the Democratic Party, the influence of the pro-nuclear lobby. I mean, even as we discover more and more details and more information that radiation is harmful at any level, and that radioactive waste is an inevitable product of any nuclear energy, including small modular reactors. Even as we prove over and over again that this stuff is worse than we thought, and there's no safe level. Parts of the Democratic Party, mostly being funded by billionaires like Bill Gates, are pushing for it harder and harder. Even as people reject it more and more, even as scientists reject it more and more. There's politicians are trying to force it on us, and this bill that would create a nuclear authority, which is answerable I think people maybe not appreciate the severity of creating a federal or a state agency that can't be controlled by the legislature or the governor, that just gets to do whatever it wants to us. This is the worst possible aspect of governmental power, to have a government which can tell us what to do with our waste and where to put it. They could decide, hey, let's stick it in downtown Toledo. Nothing's happening there. It'll create jobs. There'll be 20 or 30 jobs of people carrying barrels of radioactive waste into these abandoned warehouses or whatever they decide to do with it. It's insane. It's an insane law, and I'm glad you're fighting it, Pat.
Yeah, well, one thing that happens is that the industry, they keep putting this out, that nuclear is carbon free or low carbon, and it's just not true. But I guess it kind of goes to show that if a lie is told often enough and loud enough, the public seems to accept it, and so do our legislators. And you talk about radioactive waste being near Toledo, but it is, because it's at Davis-Besse, which is, of course, might be getting bailed out with House Bill 6.
Yeah, it's a pretty bad situation when your legislators are essentially being owned by private companies, and like this company that'll directly benefit if House Bill 104 passes. Well, Pat, if people are upset about this, what would you recommend they do?
So, well, you can get involved. You can actually call your Ohio senator and tell them no nuclear subsidies, especially not in the time when so many people need help with the COVID. We don't need to be paying extra money on our utilities for nuclear welfare. And it would be, no on House Bill 104, and at the same time, since there are two nuclear bills, fully repeal House Bill 6. That's the first energy bailout that, 5 people were arrested because of the scandal surrounding that. This questionable company whose stock is now junk rated. And people can find, you can find the contact information for your Ohio senator. Just do an internet search for the Ohio legislature, and you can find your senator by your zip code.
All right. Well, Pat Marida, thanks so much for joining us and alerting us to this. And there's a bill to repeal House Bill 6, and there's also it's been introduced into the legislature, a bill all it does is delay the fee for a year, which is like, it couldn't be more obvious that they're saying, let's just hope everybody forgets about this and it goes away, and we can go back to our usual graft and the business as usual here at the Ohio legislature. So that bill is absolutely terrible. It's essentially, that's a House Bill 6 enabling bill, but there is a bill to fully repeal House Bill 6, and that's what we want. That's what we need. So, all right. Well, thanks, Pat. Thanks for joining us. And did you know this was our 100th episode?
Oh my goodness! It's an anniversary, I guess.
Yeah. So we're glad we had you on as a guest for our 100th episode. Okay.
Oh, I appreciate it very much, being on your show.
All right. Well, thanks so much, and we'll talk to you again soon, Pat.
All right. Bye.
Bye. Okay, that was Pat Marida talking about House Bill 104. So, do we have Rebecca on the line yet, Russell? She's telling me she's trying to get on. No, apparently not. All right. Well, but what we do have on the line are our sponsors, our advertisers. Foregrade Future is brought to you by the Wood County Park District. The Wood County Park District is a natural resources conservation agency. They protect natural spaces, maintain quality green spaces, provide engaging programming, and they teach people to love and respect nature. They restore wildlife habitats, and they lead us on outdoor adventures. Wood County Parks protects natural spaces in Wood County for all to enjoy from 8 a.m. to 30 minutes past sunset every day of the year. And there's several ways to find out what's going on at the Wood County Parks. First, of course, is their website, which is simply wcparks.org. And they also have a nifty app. You go to the App Store and search for WC Parks. And you can call them at 419-353-1897. That's 419-353-1897. And, of course, look for them on Facebook and other social media. For a Great Future is also brought to you by our patrons. And patrons are people who've gone to patreon.com, and they have searched for a Green Future. They saw our page there, and they picked a membership level, and then every month a small little donation comes out of their checking account and comes over to us, and that's one of the most important ways we have to bring you this show. We really, really appreciate our patrons. And if you appreciate us on our 100th episode, consider becoming a patron. Please go to patreon.com and search for a Green Future. All right. Rebecca, are you on the line with us?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yep. Hello.
Hello.
How are you doing? Yes.
All right. How are you? More alert than last week.
What? You're
I'm more alert than last week.
Ah, excellent. All right.
But that's not saying much.
All right. Well, the more alert, the better, I guess. And I want to alert our listeners that we still have the contest going. If you want to call in at 866-240-1065 and just tell us what your favorite episode of these last 100 were, we'll send you a nice little thank you gift for joining the show. That's 866-240-1065. And so, Rebecca, how are you doing? Can you believe it? Can you believe that we made it this far, 100 episodes?
That's crazy.
Yeah, they said it couldn't be done, and yet we did it. And, actually, we have some congratulatory notes from some of our past guests. Russell, could you play the next one, please?
Okay, this is Leah Harper with Freshwater Accountability Project, and I get to live in Bowling Green, Ohio, and put the green in Bowling Green along with Joe DeMare. And I'm congratulating you, Joe, for your 100th episode of For a Green Future, and we need more of that in our world, and so just keep on going for another 100 and so more.
Yep, that was Leatra Harper. We're very grateful for that little note she let us record. So, Rebecca, I understand you have been researching a vital question for the holidays, one that people come up with every year, and I guess you have some actual answers for us.
A few, yeah, but a lot more questions, actually. Somebody, one of our listeners, actually, Cindy Matthews, wanted to know about poinsettias, which are Christmassy, so it's seasonally appropriate. So yeah, I found out that poinsettias are from the spurge family. They're native to Mexico and Central America, and were discovered by gringos in 1834, although the Aztecs had known about them quite a bit longer. Scientific name Euphorbia pulcherrima. Pulcherrima, that probably means beautiful, doesn't it? Like pulchritude? I think it means people think they're pretty. But they're most common in Mexico in the Taxco de Alarcón region. And okay, this is where my ADD seriously got me off track here. It got triggered because their Nahuatl name means, in the Aztec language, means it is Quetzalcoatl, and which got me going because Xochitl means flower in Nahuatl. I already know this. It's like a girl's name that people give children when they're trying to celebrate their Aztec heritage and stuff in Mexico. And there's a goddess. There's a goddess named, what's her name? Xochitl, goddess of flowers, sort of the cognate of Aphrodite. Her name means flower hummingbird because, I don't know, they just like hummingbirds. They named a lot of stuff hummingbirds. They're pretty. So, yeah. So if that means flower, what does Quetla mean? Looked it up. Quetla is the larva of a something called the death butterfly, and they're also poisonous, but only to some birds. And people eat them. People eat them on komals, which is like a kind of a pan that you grill and sear things on, in tacos, and they pickle them, and then they taste like herrings. Apparently, they taste more or less like herrings. So, what do you call it? Entrophagy, something where you eat insects. Insect eating, yeah. But yeah, so you have to squeeze their gut out. Apparently, like their contents of their gut out. So they're mildly poisonous, sort of. Kind of like poinsettias, which are just, they're a little bit poisonous, but they just kind of give you an oopsie tummy, even if you're a fairly small animal or child, apparently. So in order to actually die from them, you would have to keep eating them, vomiting some more, eating them. It might take several days, and then it would probably just be from what that was doing to your digestive system. So the answer was they are poisonous, but not that much.
I see. So touching that little drop of sap that sometimes appears on the poinsettia isn't going to kill you.
Yeah, that's probably okay. They're the larva. They're named after the larva of something called the death butterfly, which apparently that is actually poisonous, I think. But really, okay, this is the thing. Those Quetla thingies, the larvae that people eat, the caterpillars that people eat, they don't feed off the poinsettia. They're not the same color as the poinsettia. So what in the Aztec mind went off and said, this thing is like this thing, I'm going to give them the same name? I still cannot figure it out, frankly.
Maybe they give you a similar stomach ache if you eat them improperly or something.
Maybe. I don't know. Of course, they were named after Joseph Poinsett, who was the minister to Mexico, who was like, ooh, what's these pretty flowers that all of you have known about for thousands of years? Look at me. I'm a big discoverer.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, well, yeah, I've really raised more questions than answers, I feel.
Mm-hmm. Well, no, you answered the big one, that I've long been confused about the question if it will actually hurt you or not. So the answer is yes, but it's not, horribly, horribly serious. So, well, that's great.
Yeah, so maybe make some efforts, whatever you can, to keep them out of the way of pets and children and adults with questionable judgments. But yeah, it's not. If you mess up, it's probably going to be okay.
Okay, and that actually is one of our themes here on For a Green Future. If you mess up, it'll probably be okay, because we have our share of messing up. That's for sure. But
we do.
I think, Russell, let's hear another of those encouraging quotes that we've got. Yeah.
Someday.
Hello, Joe, and all the listeners. This is Kevin Camps from Beyond Nuclear in Don't Waste, Michigan, and I just wanted to congratulate you on your 100th show and to thank you for shining the light of truth on all the nuclear darkness that's been afflicting Ohio for the past many years. Keep it up, and look forward to the next time we're able to share an interview.
All right. That was Kevin Camps, and we've had him on a number of times, and I wish there wasn't so much to report on the nuclear industry, if you know what I mean. I wish things were just winding down for that industry the way they should be. Instead, they're, like we see with House Bill 104, the return of the radioactive mutant son of House Bill 106. Some people just keep pushing it, even though it's been proven over and over again to be such a bad idea. But one good idea, that there's a time for our eco news and views here. One nice thing to note, this is our 100th episode, our 100th anniversary, but this past week was another anniversary. It was the 50th anniversary of the Environmental Protection Agency. And December 2nd was the actual date that the President Nixon's pick for the head of the EPA, William Ruckelshaus, was confirmed by the Senate, and so that's listed as the official date of the Environmental Protection Agency. And it's worth noting because the situation back in 1970 was pretty dire. I mean, the country was still divided over the Vietnam War, and we had Richard Nixon as a president who was under all kinds of charges of corruption and so forth, and which later caused him to resign. But what happened here is Nixon, who was a Republican, and I like to stress that because once upon a time, Republicans were good guys in terms of the environment. I mean, Richard Nixon established the Environmental Protection Agency, and the Environmental Protection Agency has saved the lives of millions of Americans over the past 50 years because they put into place regulations that limited pollution, that hurt people. One of the big early successes, of course, was lead in gasoline. And I think people who grow up today, people who've been born in the 21st century, you see gas pumps and things and it says unleaded gas. You probably wonder, why do they have to say unleaded? Well, once upon a time, not long ago, gasoline literally did have lead in it. And so what was happening is the lead from this gasoline was building up, especially in the urban areas, and causing brain damage. And lead causes all kinds of health effects, high blood pressure, strokes. I mean, it doesn't just make you stupider. I mean, it literally does. It measurably makes people who are exposed to lead less intelligent. But that's not all it does. It hurts your liver. It really poisons your body in a 1,000 different ways. And one of the first things that the Environmental Protection Agency did was start limiting lead in gasoline. And it was a huge battle because the gasoline companies, much like the oil and gas companies of today fighting limits on carbon, they didn't want to limit lead in gas, because what lead did is it reduced the knocking of the pistons in the engine. Engines got more rumbly, noisier when there wasn't lead in the gas, and so they didn't want people to have noisy engines. They wanted people to be driving as much as possible and using as much gas as possible. So they were willing to sacrifice the people who lived in the urban areas to keep the lead in the gas. But there was a huge fight, and the EPA won. And at the time the EPA was created, as I said, the nation was divided. There were huge riots and protests in the streets. It sounds kind of familiar, doesn't it? But the one thing everybody agreed on was protecting the environment. And Richard Nixon did a wonderful thing, and that's probably the best thing about the Nixon legacy, was the creation of the EPA. Since then, of course, the Republicans have abandoned the environment pretty much completely, and the Democrats aren't doing too well either. But that's an important note in the Eco News, is it's a happy anniversary, because it's better that we have the EPA than when we didn't. All right, Rebecca, are you still with us?
I'm still with you.
All right, great. Okay, another piece of environmental news. This past week, I attended virtually a meeting of the interagency task force that are looking at the Yellowstone bison and controlling the Yellowstone bison. And the reason for this meeting was to talk about this winter's bison hunt, because part of the bison management plan is to cull the bison herds. And one thing about it, and if you're somebody who does environmental activism, if you go to these public meetings and these public hearings, they've all got one person in there, at least one, sometimes two, but they've all got the person who's the official designated droner. And by that, I mean literally somebody who just gets up there and gives a long presentation, and they do it in a monotone, and they talk as softly as possible, and they just talk like this, and it's almost whispering, but not quite. Their voice never gets raised. and they flash before you dozens of graphs and bars and charts, and the purpose of that person, and they must teach bureaucrats this in bureaucrat school, because I see a droner at almost every public meeting or public hearing I've been to. And what the droner did at this one is he was talking about last year's hunt and this year's hunt. And one thing he said in there is that the goal of the plan is to cut the herd back to 1,000 animals in two separate groups. So 2,000 total in two separated populations on Yellowstone. And that's not enough to sustain the herd in terms of genetics. If you cut the herd back to that point, one big event like a bad storm, a bad year, or a disease coming into the population would be enough to wipe them out. So in other words, in all that droning, the heart of it, the kernel of it, the thing that they were getting you all calm for, because when they said it sucks, is the idea that they want to cut the herd back into an unsustainably low number. And one literally brave person from one of the Native American tribes spoke up at that point and just said, it's not sustainable. We don't want 2,000 bison. We want 5 million bison. We want them to expand out of Yellowstone Park. The problem with that is that when they try, then they're faced with hunters, and they're faced with this trapping that they're herded into traps and then butchered and so forth. And so it was depressing, but it's nice to see that at least there was some dissension in the ranks. I mean, what's happening is that the native tribes are being used to cull the bison, which is, great, which is historically accurate, and it reconnects the tribes to the bison. But the federal government and the state government of Montana, at the behest of the cattle industry, are trying to use the native tribes to over-harvest the bison. They want to drive the bison pretty much into extinction. And so it's kind of blackmail. It's kind of like, oh yeah, you could reconnect to the wild bison. We'll let you go hunt them as long as you hunt enough to knock them back to nothing. And the bison, and what's happening is that the tribes are resisting that. And some of them have even said, you've given us an allotment, but we're not going to take it this year because the numbers are too low. But so what happened at this meeting is that the governments, the federal and state government, said, well, and if you guys don't take enough bison, then we're going to kill an additional 500 through our trapping and massacring. So it's not a good situation, and I'm hoping to have one of our guests that we really like having on is Stephanie Shea from the Buffalo Field Campaign. I'm hoping to get her later this month to talk about this year's upcoming hunt.
Did you ever read there's a novel called Bless the Beasts and Children about buffalo hunting?
Yes, I have read that, and it's a very moving movie also, yeah.
It's kind of depressing. My mom read it to me when I was a kid, and it's kind of about one of these things where, like, people pretend to be hunters they herd the buffalo into, like, a tiny little pasture, a whole bunch of them together, and then put people on platforms with rifles. So, literally, they can't miss. If you can't miss without hitting a human, basically. If you point your rifle anywhere near the buffalo, you will hit one. And it's amateurs, so they're torturing the buffalo essentially, just hitting them everywhere before they hit anything that actually kills them.
Yeah, buffalo are extremely difficult to kill with a bullet. I mean, a buffalo skull is so thick you could actually hit them head on with a bullet, and it won't kill them because the skull is so. You have to shoot them just right, and so that's the situation there. But let's counter that with some upbeat stuff. Russell, let's hear another one of our people giving us our congratulations.
Alrighty.
And
all right. Thank you, Joe DeMare. You are absolutely the greatest. Your show has been a major piece of trying to rescue Ohio from the miasma of corruption, deceit, and insanity. We couldn't be doing any of this work without people like you, and especially, in particular, your 100 episodes. So keep it up, my man, and we are proud to know you.
Okay, yeah, that one, I was a little kind of blushing after that one. That was Harvey Wasserman, a great figure in the environmental movement, the one who coined the term "no nukes." We're very grateful for that recording from Harvey. Okay, Eco News a little bit more. One good piece of Eco News to end on is the Pebble Mine, which is that huge mine proposed for Alaska, which would destroy the salmon populations, has been rejected again. So it's sort of an on-again, off-again mine. It was defeated in the Obama administration. Trump brought it back, but now it's been defeated again because basically there was an appeal that said it violated the Clean Water Act, and the Army Corps of Engineers said, oh, you know what, I guess it does violate the Clean Water Act.
Whoopsie.
Part of the impetus for this is that the two Republican senators from Alaska finally came out against it. And you might be wondering, wow, that doesn't seem in character that the Republicans would come out against a mine. But two factors. One, nobody in Alaska wanted it. It's like 90% of the people did not want the mine. But two, over the summer, an organization, one of the citizens groups that were opposing it, did a little sting. They went to the company that was pushing it, the Canadian mining company that was pushing this mine, and they recorded them, and they had a conversation, and part of what they did is they said, well, you know, we're not sure about investing in this. Are the legislatures involved? Are they on board with it? And the mining company officials said, oh, yeah, Murkowski, you know, both our senators, they love it. We're in touch with them every day, and this is going to happen because we've got an in with them. You know, we've we're there. And apparently in Alaska anyway, embarrassment at corruption is still a factor because very shortly after that, both the Republican senators came out and said, you know what, we don't support this. Get away from us. And so the mine is off again, and let's hope it stays
So it's not
off.
like Ohio; they still have shame.
Yeah, I'm not sure how it is
Wow.
that Alaskans still have shame and Ohio Republicans don't. I'm not sure where they lost that exactly, but it's sad that they don't.
It is.
All right, well, just got time for the letter from the future. Dear GGG, this is my letter from my great-great-granddaughter in the year 2300. My mom and your great-grandson, my dad, arrived by dirigible today for the wedding. They'll finish their quarantine just before the ceremony on the 22nd. Forgive me for talking about the wedding so much. I think I have to repeat it because it's still hard for me to believe it's happening. In the year 2300, no one believes that they have to or should get married. In fact, most people go through their whole lives, including having and raising children, without ever getting married. People only get married if they really want to, so our divorce rates are actually much lower than they were in your time. Maybe it's because of my experience with Bill Ryderson, but I have absolutely no interest in looking around for someone else to hook up with. I had a great time with Igor, but he's married now too. But that fire has definitely burned down into the warm embers of friendship, and that's where it will stay. Congratulations on the 100th episode. I know it's been a struggle for you to keep it going sometimes, but trust me, the future is a better place for it. Here in your future, we appreciate and are grateful for all the efforts some of the brave people in your time took to change things. Without those efforts, we wouldn't have a life, since so many things in your time were headed towards a dead future. Thank you all to all the people of your time who changed course and created our green future. One sad note, great-great-grandpa, I can only send you 3 more letters. Apparently too much information leaking into the past from your future can cause quantum destabilization that would change both the past and the future. We really don't want that to happen. This green future is a great one. Love, Marie I. All right. Well, that's it for our show, our 100th episode. Thanks so much for listening. This is Joe DeMare.
And Rebecca Wood.
And we are signing off. No more 3-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun